This video is about Texas Peer Assistant Programs for Nurses, TPAPN, and nursing peer review, safe harbor, and whistleblower protections. So we'll start with the Peer Assistance Program. Um, TPAPN is created to take care of nurses whose practice has become impaired with a chemical dependency or even a mental illness or diminished mental capacity. Listen, they work with them to help them return to safe practice and be able to get back to work. It's a separate entity, and if an individual is in trouble with the board and has one of the issues is chemical dependency or maybe narcotic theft, then TPAPN, that recovery program, would be a piece of their agreed order to be able to get back to practice. Peer review is a committee. It's a nursing peer review committee. They're required by all facilities that hire eight nurses or more in the state of Texas. You don't need to remember numbers for that or not, but do remember that the purpose of the peer review is to review conduct of another nurse, a peer, and or even to look at safe harbor events. So the process is the committee meetings are based on fact and study the events of an incident with the nurse that's involved. And then the committee, what they do is that, like if I was a nurse who broke standards of practice and the incident went before nursing peer review, and the peer review committee determined that I broke standards of practice and I caused patient harm, then this committee would have to notify the board of nursing of the incident and also make some recommendations on what might happen to improve the situation so it doesn't happen again. So the peer review committee, um, they don't fire the nurse or do any the HR type piece of it. Their purpose is more like a screening tool for the board of nursing to see what needs to be reported or not. So there's two kinds of nursing peer review. One's incident based and one's safe harbor. An incident based would be the situation where I harmed a patient and then I went before a group of my peers to determine whether or not I broke standards of practice. Right. So that's an incident. It's based on an incident by a nurse. And then the other one is safe harbor. And safe harbor is has to do with accepting an assignment when the nurse believes that it places patients at risk. This usually happens when places are short-staffed. A regular med-surg nurse might be pulled to the ICU or those kind of situations. So safe harbor is a big deal. You don't want to call it unless there's a good reason for it. But what happens is, let's say I'm that nurse and I work med-surg and I've been pulled to SI and I haven't worked with a monitor in 20 years and I haven't been in that kind of setting since I was in nursing school. And so I have to go to ICU. And there's no protection for me if I refuse to go. I could be fired if I refuse to go, but I can decide to call safe harbor before engaging in that assignment. The first thing I would do is I would say to my boss, I haven't been to ICU in years and I don't feel safe or comfortable going down there. If I have to go down there, I'm going to have to call safe harbor. I'm going to have to, file for safe harbor. Is there some way that we can make this assignment work out to where it's a reasonable assignment for me and it gets the job done? So your first thing, remember, when you're going to do safe harbor, the first thing you want to do is talk to your boss and say, hey, is there some kind of reasonable assignment that I can engage in that won't require me to call safe harbor? So if there is no alternate assignment and I call safe harbor, then there's a process, right? you do a quick request forms and, saying, hey, I'm calling Safe Harbor. You go ahead and, I would go ahead and go down to SI and make sure that I tried to, or I practice this, or a reasonable, prudent person in the same situation. I'd have an RN there to talk to and ask for, and then at the end of the day, before I left, I would have to complete the long form for Safe Harbor, right? So your board of nursing has a link. The forms are there. You don't have to use their forms. You can handwrite it out too. But that's the piece of Safe Harbor that if you're going to engage in a assignment that you feel is unsafe, then Safe Harbor is something that keep you from being liable if something goes wrong. As long as you're acting as a reasonable, prudent person in the same situation and don't take an hour-long break, right? So there's peer review committee. They look at incident-based peer review and safe harbor situations and incident-based peer review. The peer review committee determines if the nurse in question broke standards of practice, and if so, they report that nurse to the board of nursing. They don't have anything to do with hiring and firing. And then the peer review committee also looks at all safe harbor safe harbor peer review request and determine, what actions the facility can do to be better. The safe harbor, when you invoke it, it goes to peer review committee. It doesn't go to the board of nursing. And then the last thing on this is whistleblower protections. And this just means that if I blow the whistle, I say something's unsafe, or I report a bad situation, then I can't be fired as long as I do so in good faith. And that means that, I really believe that there's a reason to report. And if I'm not reporting, then I'm just as guilty as they are. So you can't, blow the whistle on somebody just because you're mad at somebody. You have to make sure that, you have to have a good reason, no malice or any of those kind of things. Okay. So that is the end of this video on peer review